24th of February, 1978. 5 young men from California set off on a Friday night to go and watch a game of basketball. Although said to be highly functioning, all 5 men had learning difficulties and suffered from various mental health issues and were unaccompanied on their trip. They all led predominantly stay-at-home lives, but played together in a Special Olympics basketball team called the Gateway Gators, and they were due to play a tournament the next day with a chance of winning a trip to Disneyland. Although often referred to as boys, they ranged in age between 25 and 32 years old. They were seen buying snacks and fuel after the game and were said to be in high spirits, having watched their team win. They then reportedly headed south in the direction of home. For reasons still unknown, their vehicle was found the next day in an inhospitable, snow-covered mountain road 50 miles away from home. An eyewitness who found the car said they were seen with an unknown woman and a baby. But 4 months later, their bodies were found, stretched over a remote area of the Sierra Nevada mountains, 11 miles from the car. All except one. The mysterious circumstances surrounding their disappearance and the last few weeks of their lives are both puzzling and suspicious, and remain unsolved 40 years later. This is the story of the Yuba County Five.
It was huge. It was on 2 legs. It was bipedal.
Some UFOs flying through the air are real.
Loch Ness, on which the eyes of the round effect the Great Pyramid was built with a level of technological sophistication far in excess of anything that we have today.
Mate, what the fuck? I mean, it's nuts. This story, I didn't know anything about this a week ago until you slid very slippery into my DMs and said, check this one out. And it's crazy. It's full of absolute nonsense, and I love it. But maybe before we get into it, we should introduce ourselves. But probably because this is episode 1. Yay!
I guess so. Yeah. Hi, I'm Sam.
Hey, I'm Luke, and this is Hear Me Out. It's our new podcast. It's our new little baby, isn't it, mate?
Yeah, man. I think it's a good excuse for us to get together once a week to talk about mysteries, conspiracies, anything that tickles our interest. Really.
Bigfoot, like your t-shirt.
Oh, yeah.
That's a good t-shirt.
I'm It is, mate. Actually, I'm part of an online group of enthusiasts who are trying to prove the existence of your mum.
That's also known as Sados, isn't it?
Oh man,
I think it is. I think it is.
Yeah.
But anyway, we're going to get to that. I mean, that's what this podcast's about, right? It's like we're going to discuss these things, whether we believe it, don't believe it, or whether one of us feels strongly or doesn't. That's what this is about.
Absolutely, dude. But I've got a story for you this week.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Yuba County 5. I think it's important that we start off talking about who these guys were. You know.
Sure.
So it's the late 70s. We've got 5 guys who are on their way to go and watch a game of basketball. It all sounds normal. They all were intellectually challenged. I don't think they had an actual diagnosis of any sort, because I don't think diagnoses existed back then. All the media were able to report were, oh yeah, these guys are retarded.
Yeah, which is nuts.
Like it was some.
It's great.
Yeah, which is like it's some sort of scientific diagnosis.
They're like, yeah, these guys are retarded. That's what we're stamping on this, and that's what's sticking.
That's it. If your brain is not 100%, yeah, you are scientifically back in the 70s a retard, which is awful, really. But also it doesn't help it doesn't help because I think as we get into the details of this story, you'll see how the maybe having a little bit more of a diagnosis and understanding of their individual disabilities would potentially have helped us get to the bottom of what happened here,
or just understand,
but
because there is nothing, like you said. It's just these guys had low IQs, and they had varying different disability, mental disabilities or handicaps, and that's what makes this such an interesting story, or like such an open-ended story, I guess.
Yeah, it's completely in a way unrelatable. It's and there is there's plenty of theories, but it is still absolutely unsolved. So these guys, we had Theo Weir, Jack Hewitt, Jack Madruga, Bill Sterling, and Gary Mateus. And it's Gary, I think, that gets a fair bit of attention later on in this story, and you'll see why. He was the only one who didn't have a low IQ, who didn't have learning disabilities.
He didn't fit really, did he? He was like an odd member of this group, like kind of.
Yeah. Like the other guys were just had severe learning difficulties, whereas he didn't. But he was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia.
Oh, nice.
And he was probably a little bit higher functioning than the rest, but he was known to go through various psychosis issues, and he was known to be violent. So he was actually booted out of the army on medical terms.
That'll do it.
For those sorts of things. Yeah. So unlike the others weren't violent in any way, and I think that the parents of these guys, I should say that as well, but I think the youngest was mid-20s and the oldest is 32. So these aren't boys; these are dudes. These are guys. These are like our age,
But they were referred to as boys, right? That was effectively how they were seen or known, and I guess that was to do with their limited functioning IQ, and also
absolutely.
because I guess they are younger.
Yeah, absolutely. It was. I think it's because it was an affectionate term used by the media, by their parents, by everyone at the time. It was just like, it's the boys. But no, these are not to be confused. These are adult men living at home with their parents, living predominantly stay-at-home lives. They're not getting out much. They don't like being away from home for too long. That's quite important to this story too. And they certainly wouldn't want to go out overnight, but they were quite excited to go to a basketball game on this Friday night. And they were also very excited to play a game of basketball the next day in a tournament. So, a couple of them had like laid out their clothes ready for the next day, getting all excited for the tournament. So they really did have a reason to come home and to want to be back. But they didn't. They didn't come back. They went to the basketball game all together in Theo's Mercury Montego car.
Lovely. Nice car.
Yeah, which was his pride and joy at the time. And they got down there, watched their team win, and then they were last seen buying like a heap of junk food from a convenience store, and weren't seen again after that.
But that junk food vibe, right? It's like we've all been there. You finished your basketball game, you go and you buy food. But the thing is, they turn up at this place, right? This is the thing that got me. They turn up at this place just before it's about to close. I'll be livid. I'll be livid.
Yeah, so they were last seen at 10 o'clock. And we know it's 10 o'clock because the clerk who served them was really pissed off.
He should be.
Yeah, but these dudes came in just as he was closing. And so as soon as like the police report went out, and I'll get to that, but as soon as the police report came out, he was like the first one to phone them in and say, look, I've ID'd these guys. I know it was them. It was their car.
I'd call the police just because of that. But look, there's a bunch of fucking snacky little fuckers who have come in to buy a bunch of pepper armies, right? I'm closing up. I had the grill going down, and they're fucking slipping under the grill, trying to buy up everything. I would have called the police. Fact. And it's a good job he did, I guess.
It is a good job he did, yeah. So that was the last reported sighting, or last confirmed sighting.
Okay.
So yeah, that was about 10 o'clock on the Friday night. It's about 5:30 in the next morning where I think Theo's mum gets up and she realizes that her son's not come home. So shits the bed a little bit and
Yep.
starts calling the other mums who confirm that their sons aren't home either.
And they've also shut the bed. All of them. Just big loads of people just shitting the bed.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of shit in a lot of beds.
Yep.
And they leave it for a day because they figure that although their kids have limitations, we'll just see if they come home.
Benefit of the doubt, right?
Benefit of the doubt. These are adult men. They rang it in to the police at about 8:30 on their Saturday night, and the police kind of said the same thing. They're like, adult men don't go missing. Adult men can go where they want. They do all sorts of crazy shit. And
Chill out.
even though it's completely out of character for these guys. But the police did put out a couple of messages to other police departments in the area. And that's when I think that led to the first lead, which was the guy in the convenience store. We had a couple of other calls as well. So the next call was from a guy who is called Joe. And he was out on a Friday night, that same Friday, sussing out a location to take his family on.
This is weird.
On vacation.
This is weird, man. No one goes on pre-holiday holiday, right? To go, I'll go on a little holiday to scout out the holiday that I'm then going to go on. What?
No, absolutely. I think that is super weird. And we'll get to that bit in a bit. But this guy is having a little drive up the mountain, make sure that the conditions are okay. It's a snowy mountain, horrible mountain. And he breaks down, gets stuck in the snow. And he's pushing himself out of the snow, or trying to, which induces a heart attack.
What a shit evening. You've gone on your pre-holiday holiday, your car breaks down, and then you're like, all right, well, I better push it then. And then almost dead.
Yeah, but his day gets worse, right, from this point.
Go on.
So he's having a heart attack, and there's no one about because he's in a really remote area, right up in the forest. And he can see like two sets of headlights, apparently, on the road behind him, and he could see people outside of the vehicles.
He's saved. He's saved.
In the absolutely he is. And so he's calling out. He gets his strength together and he starts calling out for help. And as soon as these guys hear him shouting, they turn off the lights. They shut up, basically. They go into silence. So was he hallucinating it? Was it something to do with his heart attack? You don't know. But he goes back to dying quietly in his car, or trying not to at least. And it was a while later, and you could hear whistling, and he sees flashlights this time. Don't
just skip over that, right? Do not just skip over the whistling part. Whistling.
Well,
right.
I don't know what kind of whistling.
We're going up into the mountains. It's cold. It's dark. Yeah. You're not just skipping through the mountains whistling at night in the freezing cold, ignoring, what's that? I can hear a guy screaming because he's having a heart attack. No.
It could be any kind of whistle, dude. It could be like an animal, feral kind of whistle.
Okay, well, I want to think about it like
sinister.
I want to think about it like a song, like the sound of music being whistled.
I like to think about it as a bit of a twit to woo.
Oh,
yeah, like someone's seen a hottie, and they're like, yeah.
Jeez. So, okay.
Nice.
Cool. So we've got a bunch of people that have gone up the mountain. Oh, here's the thing too, not to get sidetracked, but so this dude in the car, Mr. Joe, he sees two sets of headlights. So effectively there's two cars that have pulled up, or so he thinks have pulled up. So you know this and bring it into the story, but where's that second car? There was another car sighted, right? Before they got to the mountain. There was a red pickup truck, right? Yeah? No? Yeah?
Okay, so this was like the third call.
Okay,
right?
cool.
So the second call comes from Joe to say, I've seen some guys. I think I've seen the guys you're on about. I was having a heart attack and the bastards didn't come and save me when I was dying, And on my way back down the mountain, getting help and stuff, I saw an abandoned Mercury Montego, right? The police were like, we're not going to do much of this. probably, because it's not where we're expecting to find these kids. You know,
Sure.
it's not on the route back home. It's 50 miles out into the
Middle of nowhere.
like east. Yeah, it's like east of the location, up into the Sierra Nevada mountains, and like a 2-hour drive it would be on that sort of terrain. And they've got no reason to be there, so we're not going to investigate too much. The next call comes in, and it's a woman saying, "Hi, I've seen these guys. Yeah, they bought some stuff from my convenience
more
store."
snacks. Hungry
More
little
snacks.
fuckers.
Yeah, and I guess where this woman was calling from was probably about 30 miles away from home as well. So, you know, they could be out on a bit of a road trip. And it's, you know, you need snacks on a road trip,
You
dude,
do.
you know?
You do.
I mean, it makes sense. But they were in a red pickup truck. She IDs the guys and says that these are the guys,
Mm-hmm.
but that car is not the car they were in. They were in a red pickup truck. 2 of them were in my store. 2 of them were out in the truck. And one was using a payphone, making a phone call.
Yep.
Which is weird because no one had heard from these guys.
Well, that's a lot of detail, right? She's like, 2 of them were in the store, 2 of them were in the truck, and 1 of them was using the payphone. But like, that's what's so weird about it is like, you don't just switch vehicles like willy-nilly. You're not just like, right, all right, we had enough of this car now, let's jump in another one. So like, surely in my brain, it makes sense that if some of them were with the pickup truck, it was that there was other people involved and they convoyed together to where Joe said that he saw them up this mountain because he saw 2 sets of headlights. So that would make sense. There's other people there.
Right. And the other people you refer to, so Joe's story gets even more interesting. He says that when he sees people stood in the glow of the headlights, he sees 5 guys, a woman, and a baby.
Sure.
And I guess a woman and a baby is kind of a hard thing to misidentify. If you're able to see down the hill enough to see 5 individuals or 6 individuals and a halfling,
A mini one.
and a mini one, like, yeah, you can see the cars, you can see the people. I mean, it's a weird thing to misidentify a woman and a baby.
Sure.
Yeah. So I think that. But anyway, the police weren't giving it that much credibility until the next day. A forestry officer, man, calls in the police and says, "I found the car you're looking for. There was an abandoned."
This is the car you are looking for. In a Star Wars Yoda moment, I found the car you're looking for.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, he did. Okay.
That happened. Carry on. Sorry.
So yeah, he finds the car, and it's exactly the right one. It's a silver Montego Mercury, and it's been abandoned on the hill.
Mm-hmm.
The road that it's on is not a tarmac road; it is a gravel road full of potholes and horrible gaps and bumps and whatever. And when the police find it, it's stuck in snow, but it's not stuck in so much snow you couldn't get out of it.
And it's not broken down right either. It's it's good.
They tested it, and mechanically it works.
And they
right?
had fuel, and that's heat, right? That's heat in the car. But that again, this car. I mean, I don't know if we said it earlier, but this car was the prized possession of, was it Theo's car?
Yeah.
So it was whose car?
It was. Let me have a look at my
But that's all right. But either way, this car, it was the prized possession of one of the lads. And like you said, you wouldn't just drive it off a track that's like covered in potholes. But like you said, nothing had happened to the bottom of this car. Like it hadn't bottomed out. It hadn't like been damaged by any of the potholes. So
yeah, absolutely. So whoever's driven it up this road knew the road, and that's what the police determined, because the road was so treacherous. By the time the police had got to it, a number of their vehicles had received damage to the underside because potholes, ravines, bumps, whatever. Yeah. This car, the Jack McGruger's silver Mercury Montego, like you say, was his prized possession.
Okay.
It was driven as if that person knew the road very well.
Or could he have been following? Because so Joe says he sees 2 sets of headlights. So could this car have been following the red pickup up the hill. Hence why there's no damage to the car, but he also might not have known the road. So he was following someone who did know the road.
Absolutely.
that would-
absolutely. And you've got this story which is a bit strange. But as soon as you find the vehicle on that road where Joe says he saw the vehicle and he saw these guys, he heard the whistling, saw the woman and the baby and 2 sets of headlights, all of a sudden it gains a lot of credibility.
Sure.
Because the car is there,
Yeah, it's where he said he saw
Yeah.
them and the people. But again, if there wasn't 2 vehicles, you would have had to have had 5 lads and a woman and a baby in a car that isn't a pickup truck, traversing this horrible pothole road that the police cars got damaged in. So it couldn't have been fully laden. It just wouldn't have been. So
Nope.
it must have been split over 2 cars. It makes sense.
Dude, I'm with you. Yeah, well, none of this makes any sense at all.
No, that's fair enough.
So anyway, it gets weirder. There were then sightings called in all around the country. Even as far as Ontario, in Canada, and Tampa, Florida.
That doesn't make any
where
sense.
people saying they're seeing. Yeah, it's people saying they're seeing these guys. So obviously there's a fair amount of misidentification. It is the 70s. There's no CCTV everywhere. So it's just people's word, and the police have to sort of wean out a lot of these stories, which is why Joe's story at first instance is dismissed. Like, this is probably nonsense, buddy. But their car was found on that mountain trail,
Sure.
in hospitable conditions as well. It then gets even weirder. So there's no evidence of where they've gone from that point. It's just a car.
The car's
It's
stuck in
got-
the snow, in a drift, but not a drift that's that big. Car still fully works, still got fuel in it, and they've just left it. And I'm pretty sure I also read, or did I read, or did I see it somewhere, that when they found the car, one of the driver's side window, I believe, was down. So you've got this cold evening, you've got the driver's side window is down. That to me says that someone has wound down their window to talk to someone, because you don't just leave your window open in a freezing cold. It just doesn't make, it makes no sense.
Oh yeah, no, yeah. The conditions were absolutely harrowing
Yeah.
this night. It was. They're having snow drifts up to 9 feet.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard it being said. So
Crazy.
it's a lot of snow out here. It's
Yeah.
very cold. And also so they found all the wrappers for all the snacks. So that ties in
The
and
fucking
gives
hundreds of
credibility.
snacks. The fucking hundreds and hundreds of snacks filling up the footwells.
It gives credibility to the story of the guy from the convenience store
Sure.
who was last seen in Chico
Yeah.
after the game.
It corroborates the story.
Yeah, we can now start seeing that actually, yeah, they left that store and they did go the wrong way, way the wrong way, probably 2 hours into the mountains, and then there was no trace of whichever way they went after that. So weirder still is that 3 weeks after they've disappeared, a woman who's completely unrelated to any of the boys, doesn't know them, she's not part of the program or anything else or any part of their lives, receives a phone call from a man who didn't identify himself, and he says, "I know where the missing 5 men are."
That sounds cocky,
who's-
doesn't it? That's cocky.
Yeah, who's this? Doesn't say, he just hung up. Right, okay. So she's like, "That's weird. I don't get phone calls like that very often. I'm gonna phone that into the police."
1471 it. That's what I would have done.
I don't know if they had that back then.
All right, carry on.
But yeah, maybe. Yeah, that would have been case solved if they did.
Case
So
1471. Oh, yeah, I've got you. What's your name? Jim. Cool. Brilliant.
Jim did it. Okay. Next day, same guy phones back. She assumes it's the same guy. He doesn't identify himself, obviously. But he says, "I need help. I've hurt those guys real bad." She's like, "What guys? Who have you hurt real
Who are you
bad?"
on about, mate?
Yeah, I mean,
I'm just
this is
sitting
really
here
ominous.
doing Sudoku. I'm doing a Sudoku, and you're ringing me. Twice now, in fact.
Annoying it's getting.
Really
yeah.
annoying.
What guys? And he goes, "Don't play dumb with me."
That's horrible, isn't it? That's That's nasty. There's no need for that.
Yeah.
Even if you're phoning someone to say I've killed a bunch of people or that I know where they are, don't call her dumb. She's done nothing.
Well, back then, mate, they're calling everyone retards. You know,
True.
scientists were. So I reckon we're okay with that.
Yeah, fair.
So don't play dumb with me. I don't know how big the case was at the time. I mean, this is a few weeks after the disappearance, so I'm sure that a lot of people in the media would be aware of this case. And then the next day, the guy calls back, and his one-liner then is, "Those 5 guys are all dead."
Shit. Now it's time to shit the bed, isn't it?
Okay, yeah. I mean, does it sound like? To me, it's interesting because if there was foul play here, if there's foul play involved in this case at all, a lot of murderers, mass murderers, serial killers, people like that, like the sensationalism. They like the notoriety they get with being known for their crimes.
It's theatrical as well, right? It's an act. It's all a big thing.
Yeah, and they may have seen something like that in a movie, and they're just calling it in, like just doing an anonymous tip to someone random just to say, "I'm the killer."
But don't play dumb with me is such an odd line, right? Because it's not like, fair enough if you ring a random person and say, "I've killed the 5 men," or "I know where the 5 men are." That's fair enough. But then being like, "Don't play dumb with me," suggests that she in particular should know where they are. So like you said, maybe that was just because he assumed that the case was huge at this point. Or maybe just because he's a fucking psychopath.
Either way, yeah. So is it?
Or she. Oh, no, it was a man's voice, wasn't it?
It was a man's voice, yeah. Is it this is the voice of a third party who was involved in foul play in this case? Or could it be someone who's suffering a psychotic episode, genuinely calling for help? The second call says, "I need help. I've hurt those guys real bad."
We know someone who had psychotic episodes, don't we? Wow. Yeah.
After that, for 6 months, there's nothing, until June of the same year, some motorbikers pulled over in the forest. They're out on a ride. It's a hot summer's day. They pulled over at these like abandoned, not necessarily abandoned, but like the forest rangers have like lots of different trailers and campsites set up across the wilderness, I guess, and it's to support their. Maybe. I mean,
could be.
I don't know.
All right. Well, I'm going to call them sex huts just for the purpose of this.
Okay.
Or should we just call it cabin?
If you are a forest ranger from the late 70s in California, and you know anything of anything sexual that may or may not have happened in one of these huts, write in to Playboy, let them know about it. I'll buy a copy of Playboy.
And me.
Purely professional, only to find out the answer.
Yeah.
And, if there's not one in there, I'll keep on buying it every week just until I get your answer,
all
mate.
Right.
So
nice.
you better tell me what happened in those huts.
Moving on.
I don't even know where I am anymore.
Right, so these bikers find this hut, right? These rangers' huts.
Theodore was discovered in a 9-foot trailer by these bikers, wrapped in blankets and wearing no shoes. Police were called. Police kind of had an idea as to who it would be, but when they got there, obviously, it was confirmed. And the first of these missing lads was found. They determined that his cause of death was exposure, and from his beard growth and weight loss, they determined that he'd probably been alive between 8 to 12 weeks from the point where he went missing. Which kind of goes back to that phone call we had, which happened 3 weeks after they disappeared. So they kind of makes that one like less credible. But the random phone call saying they're all dead, because he certainly wasn't.
Because he wasn't dead at this point, right? Because of his beard.
Yeah, he wasn't dead. He was in this cabin, and it gets really strange. He had died of exposure, but he had frostbite all over his feet. He had lost about 5 toes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but were they just gone?
I haven't found the detail of that, dude. I don't know. I didn't look into where did the toes go.
I need to know where the toes were.
Right.
I mean, this story has no weight to it if I don't know where the toes have gone.
We might as well wrap it up right here, buddy, because I have no idea. But
Fair enough. But all right, let's skip over the toes.
It's not important. I promise you. It's interesting, but it's not important. But
I'll be the judge of that, son.
His toes are gone, and he had obviously not lit a fire in there. There's no fire anywhere. There was a fire to be lit. There were matches. There were things to burn, like not wood, but there was certainly like furniture, books, things like that you could use to burn. And there was also empty food cans. I think 30 of them.
Wasn't it 30 cans of tuna or something? It was like the same food.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to starve yourself because you're sick of having the same food. But what's weird?
I like tuna, but some people...
Yeah. So they found 30 cans that had been eaten, and they'd been taken from a storage locker. Next to the storage locker was another storage locker, and in that there was enough food to last all 5 men a year. Yet,
Okay.
Theo here had died from exposure, from hypothermia.
So this is the thing. This goes back to us saying like, these are the holes that you can't fill, because like we say, okay, the lads were diagnosed with having low IQ or whatever, but like if they were not handicapped enough for their families to let them go off and go away and go out in their own cars and drive around, let's assume that they couldn't have been that handicapped. They were obviously learning impaired, but like you find, if you find matches, you find all of this food, it's nuts. Like you wouldn't just, I guess you wouldn't just lay down and die until all of these resources had been used up. Or at least you've been trying to find.
Absolutely. There was also a gas stove in there, and there was a gas tank outside that all it needed to do was be switched on at the top of the gas tank, like your barbecue ones. Yeah. Turn that on, and they'd have had heat. They'd have had cooking the food. They could have lived there, all 5 of them, for a year. Yeah.
For a year.
So it was pretty kitted out, and it's a bit of it's troubling that it wasn't used. So Gary's tennis shoes, Gary Mateus, the guy who was not learning disabled, but was
the dude, the army guy, the crazy psychotic army guy.
His tennis shoes were found in the cabin. Theo's boots were gone, which is why he didn't have any boots on. Maybe, he had taken them when Theo's already dead and thought, those are better shoes than mine, I'll take them. And he doesn't need them. He's got no toes. So, maybe he was there. Also, the food cans were opened with a P38 can opener, they had determined, which was a army issue can opener, which only Jack Hewitt and Gary Mateus would have known how to use. Dude, you could give me like a 1970s can opener, I would not have a clue how to use it. I always see.
I barely know how to use a glass.
Yeah, you see like those can openers on the back of a Swiss Army knife, right?
Yeah.
Where's the bit that you cook onto the side of your rice pudding and just turn the knob and it rotates and?
Yeah. It would be a sad
I would starve
day
to
for
death,
me,
I think. If I had a P38 military issued can opener from 1970s, it doesn't matter how many cans you give me, I'm dead.
I'm quite tubby, so I think I'd work it out in order to survive and eat food because I really enjoy eating. But someone with your supple frame, I think, would probably perish.
Oh,
quite
I would.
quickly.
I would. Yeah, you've got the reserves to last a little longer.
And I would
and
take
the
your shoes.
determination as well. I think you'd be noshing straight through the metal.
I think I could get through it. Yeah, I'd nosh through the metal, sure.
5 men are dead, Luke. Can we stop joking for once?
I'm not joking. It's made me hungry.
So yeah, there's there's at least evidence that says Gary was at that trailer at one point, or
Yeah.
Jack Hewitt.
Mhm.
But then it was the next day they found Jack Madruga and Bill. They found them a little while away from the trailer, within miles, and they found their skeletal remains. They determined that again they died from exposure, but couldn't tell much more because
But there was no evidence, I guess, of those guys having ever been at the hut.
no,
or the
you're
cabin.
right. And the detectives at the time thought that they may not have made it. Yeah, they're from the direction of the car. So either they made it and they're walking back towards the car,
Right.
or they never made it in the first place and they fell a few miles short of the cabin.
How far was the cabin? How far was the cabin from where the car was found? It
No, it's
wasn't very
20
far,
miles.
right? So the people who had made it to the cabin had walked 20 miles, which I'd imagine would have taken days.
Yeah. In those conditions, it would have killed people. Yeah.
In those conditions with no food and no warmth.
Yeah.
So then it's plausible that two people would have just died and the toes
Yeah.
missing from.
They reckon
Okay, cool.
they reckon
Okay,
it would
I'm
take
with
at
you.
least a couple of days in those conditions to walk that far, and it could easily be deadly trying to do it. So yeah, they thought that based on that, it's reasonable to suggest they never made it to the cabin. Now, so
Okay.
we've got Jack Hewitt next. So the next day, the search party is out for Jack Hewitt and Gary Mateus, and Jack's family get involved, and the police did not want them involved. They've just found skeletal remains of the other guys, and they said, "Look, don't bother. Please don't get involved. You're going to find something you don't want to find." And he helped out anyway, and it's really grim. But he found a jacket. He found a jacket that belonged to his son Jack,
His son,
and as he
yeah.
picked it up off the ground, a spine fell out the back of it.
Fuck. Just fuck, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like you're looking for your son, hoping that he's not dead. You find his jacket and his spine rolls out.
Yeah, that's pretty grim.
I'm suddenly not hungry anymore.
Yeah, not for human spines anyway.
No. Yeah. So by this point then obviously it had been. See, this is obviously because it was cold when they died, right? So you would imagine that the body would have been preserved for some time. But then when it got hot, hotter into the summer months,
Scavengers.
that just eroded.
And animals.
Okay.
There's a lot of animals about there, and they had scattered their remains as well. So when you find these skeletal remains, they're not all in one place. You know, they're in an area.
So it's not like just someone had dropped. So that's the thing. There's another thing. It's not like, oh, I'm wandering around. I'm trying to get to the cabin. I'm trying to find help. I've just dropped down dead. Their bits of their bodies are everywhere. So like you said, that could be scavengers, or they could have been mutilated and chopped up before this and scattered.
Absolutely. There's yeah.
Like, how would you know? How would you know?
Well, I don't think there was any indication to say that they're being cut up. I think often you would find like marks on the bones as things have chopped through it. Even stab wounds, you often get marks on
Okay.
Yeah.
But these were just pulled away from the original.
I think
site.
the bones didn't show any evidence of foul play, but it didn't rule it out. You know, there's nothing to rule out foul play here because all it was scattered bones. And if there was any sort of gnawing or anything like that, you could say, well, that's an animal, not foul play. You know, so quite difficult.
So recapping, we're now 3 people's bodies have been found. One in the sex cabin or just cabin.
No, it's 4. It's 4.
and-
So
Okay, so one's in the cabin. Two are
on their way to
found
the cabin,
on the way to the cabin, and one is now
just up the road again,
the
a
last
couple of
one-
miles up the road. Is on the road with the cabin on.
Okay.
So we don't know what direction.
But they were all split up. So yeah, it's pretty gnarly that they all split up.
Yeah, well, we don't know what happened. Oh, bearing in mind, I didn't mention, that I don't know what drives a person when they're lost and abandoned out in the wilderness, on a snowy night, to walk uphill. Surely you would walk back the way you came.
You would think, wouldn't you? And that's what makes it the whole story like this is why it's so interesting. This one is because let's say you did leave your car, you would walk down the road, wouldn't you? Like you wouldn't walk off into the woods.
Yeah.
You just wouldn't. So straight away, it makes no sense. And they all and bear in mind, all 5 of them would have had to have been on the same page somewhat to go, I think we should go for the woods.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like
you say that. I think that they may have been persuaded. I think if somebody is a little bit, as I say, someone like, and the theory is that Gary can be a little bit more influential than the rest, and the others were susceptible to being influenced. A stressful situation, guys, follow me. But
I guess they trust him, right? If he's got that sort of attitude.
But we don't know what sort of mental state Gary's in. So he could be off on some sort of psychosis, a psychopathic episode, running these guys off out into the middle of nowhere deliberately, without really knowing what he's doing. But the guys who are not used to being away from home, blindly following him. And I think, and that's possibly the most innocent version of the story that we can imagine, because there's no other reason as to why they would all.
100%. But the version that makes sense. Okay, so when you read out these facts the way that they've been read out today, the version that makes sense, obviously, is Gary, for whatever reason, was having a psychotic episode. He knew other people, hence the red pickup truck. So he coaxed these boys into the middle of nowhere. But the thing is, let's say he coaxed them into the middle of nowhere. He didn't, or there's no indication that he murdered them. They just all died from exposure. So it makes no sense in his psychotic. I mean, all right, let's say that psychotic episodes don't make sense anyway. But what would be in it for him to take 4 other lads up a mountain and himself, and to abandon the car? There seems like there's nothing in it for him. Like literally nothing. He didn't even steal the car. It's not like he took them up the mountain, ditched them, and fucked off in the car. He literally got nothing out of it.
This is what I'm saying. It is the most innocent version of events at the moment. Looks like that under some influence, these guys were ushered up a mountain or directed up a mountain. And they followed him. I don't think that they would have understood psychotic episodes. They certainly wouldn't actually have understood psychotic episodes. So they wouldn't have questioned the mental health of Gary in that moment.
Of course.
But I'll come back to it, and I mentioned it earlier. Gary at the time was the absolute poster boy for the clinic that he had been working with. His doctor said he is stable, he's on his medication, and he's a success story. So I don't know what. Yeah.
There was no signs of him acting out. So it doesn't fit where he was at in his treatment or in like you said in the clinic. So the whole thing, it's just like a circle. It's like you try and tie it up, but you can't, because you just get lost in this maze of, but there was that, but there was this. And for me, it really, the main thing I think is the dude who's had the heart attack and saw them in the car. Like, I find that crazy that this, and the red pickup truck, like obviously it's not talked about anymore, other than the fact that this woman saw a red pickup truck. But let's say that is true. She's seen this red pickup truck, and Joe up the mountain then sees 2 cars. Like, for me, that's the weirdest part. It's not that weird that everyone dies because they're all out in a freezing cold mountain. It's weird that one of them is never seen again, and there's a red pickup truck that is never mentioned again. I
think the weirdest bit is
and one of the boys.
We can't, because there's nothing that ties a red pickup truck into the story other than the claim from the woman in the convenience store. You got Joe's claim, which is he saw 2 sets of headlights. Yeah.
Which could be anything. That could just be that could be a reflection.
I guess it
If he
could be, but if you can clearly
see
see 6 people and a baby.
Well, he's having a heart attack.
Which
yeah, but
part
he's having
is
a
he
heart attack.
hallucinating? Is he hallucinating seeing anyone full stop?
Exactly.
Well, he did see some people because the car was there.
The car was found where he said. So he was, and I wouldn't imagine that too many cars would be driving up and down that track at that time of night. But then the other weird thing, when the woman sees the red pickup truck, she says that one of them are on the phone. So let's assume that one of them are on.
Who are they on the phone to?
But none of the none of the parents report. Oh, yeah, they called. They checked.
Nobody
in.
ever heard from them after Friday night. Yeah, nobody ever reported hearing from them. And I would suggest as well that they probably didn't have all that many people to call. I think that they were quite a close-knit group of friends, and they didn't have an exciting social life. And if they were going to call anyone, they would be calling home. They're not used to being away from home for a long period of time. Even going out for the evening was a bit of a one-off, bit of a treat. And they would be calling their parents. They'd be calling a little bit of comfort from that, I guess. If there's and telling them what.
Of course. Well, to land, let's take. You got, like I said, you got pretty much 4. There's 5 of them, but there's 4 that are so uncomfortable, really, and only ever stay at home. And all of a sudden, they're found so far away from where they should be, dead, scattered across this mountain, all centered around this cabin. It's not like they just got lost. Because like you said, any normal person who just gets lost would either, 1, stay with the car, 2, if they saw Joe's car and ignored it, that's obviously weird because you'd think, all right, this guy's shouting for help because he's having a heart attack. But you'd be thinking, well, there's someone who might be able to help us. They might have, but the car's not broken. And man, there's so much to this story that I just find so intriguing. And like I said, like, I'm sure that people that will be listening to this probably haven't heard this story. I hadn't a week ago. And I think it's stuff like this that made us want to do this podcast, right? Is to be able to pick things that just interest us and just shoot the shit on it as to why we think it happened, like why it's so interesting. And hopefully people can, can spend a bit of their day just escaping and listening to us chat shit and bring this stuff to life a little bit. Is there anything else you want to say further to it?
I think, again, I'll just echo what you said. It's just, it's a nut story. It's still unsolved over 40 years later. You've got every single fact, every single piece of evidence just doesn't make too much sense. You've got no real reason as to why any of these guys would have left a vehicle. He left his pride and joy on the side of a mountain with no damage on it. Hiked uphill in a blizzard in like fatal conditions to ultimately their deaths. Their parents all believed that there is third-party influence in this. They know their kids. They know that they would not have willingly wanted to go up here.
Third party outside of Gary, or the fact that Gary was never found, that is the third party?
They were, I think I said at the beginning, they had issues with Gary. I think it is because he wasn't like them. And they were concerned about Gary and his influence on the boys. But they know their kids and they all believe that, something sinister has happened. They've been marched up a mountain. They've got no reason to be there. It almost feels like they've also got no reason to try and be surviving in a cabin with access to food, but not eat the food, not light the fire, not turn the gas on.
Do you know the crazy thing though, if let's say at least one of the guys, I mean, we don't know for sure, but we know at least one of them made it to this cabin. You're telling me that there's one guy who was smart enough to survive days in the woods on his own. He would have had to make shelter, keep warm. Okay, weeks. But no, I'm saying days from when he left the car to when he arrived at the cabin. He would have had to have spent days surviving, eating, drinking, keeping somewhat warm so that he doesn't die, right? And yet when he gets to the cabin, he can barely use a tin opener, but it's proven that he did somehow. And the fact that, like, I mean, let's face it, you arrive at a cabin after walking for days. I mean, look, we don't know what state he was in. So the fact that he didn't check for food, or the fact that he didn't find food, or the warmth, it might have just been that he was so fucked up from being out for those 2 days, losing his toes, that he literally just got a stockpile of the closest food he could find to him, wrapped himself up, and just ate that food and just
No, the detectives
just died.
said that the 8 blankets that were wrapped over him were done so in a way where it would have been done by someone else. They were tucked under him.
Yeah,
was
one
over
said
his
it was
face
over his
and
head,
over his
right?
head, yeah.
One was over his head. You don't put a blanket over your head,
No.
in preparation.
I'm,
well, I mean, I don't
yeah,
know,
I'm
but
certain. Certain, yeah.
Someone was with him, right, in that cabin, because there was something that I saw, and I'm not sure what tie it was now, but there was a gold watch that was found in there, and this gold watch was
It didn't belong
it
to
was
any
just
one
out
of them.
place. And it didn't belong to any one of them, but it was found in this hut, and I guess it could have been someone who had visited the hut previously, but the fact that people don't visit these huts very often, and they're there just for, like you said, for the rangers, no one would just leave a gold watch, you'd imagine. So that's odd too.
Yeah. So yeah, that kind of brings us to the end of the story. Because there's literally nothing more to say on it. There isn't an end.
There isn't an end.
Other than
There isn't
Gary
an end.
Mateus was never found, and that's kind of it. Those are all the facts. There we have it. The story of the Yuba County 5. It is a mystery. There are multiple theories all across the internet, and many we haven't covered. If we haven't covered it, leave them in the comments. Let us know what you think.
Yeah, and don't forget to smash the subscribe button below. We'd love to have you as part of our little team, and we'll be putting out these videos every single week. Also, don't forget to go and follow us on Instagram at HMOPOD, same on Twitter. And yeah, we'll see you next week. Cheers.